I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Center for Russian, East European, Eurasian Studies, and today also on behalf of our co-sponsors, or the sponsors of our speaker, the School of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. I have an easy job of it today because I just turn it over to the SLLC director, Mark Greenberg, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much, Bart. This is also sponsored by the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures, which is Lilia Schürcks' home department this semester. We're very pleased to have Dr. Lilia Schürcks here with us, who is here courtesy of the Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienst, which is funding her stay here. She's teaching in the Slavic department 2 graduate courses, one in Slavic syntax, the other one in Slavic sociolinguistics. And Dr. Schürcks comes to us from Berlin, where she lives, but she also teaches at the universities of Gießen and Potsdam, the latter of which is where she received her PhD under the tutelage of the well-known Slavic linguist Peter Costa, a mutual colleague of ours. I don't want to take too much time, but I just want to say a few things about Professor Schürcks, who is from Shumen originally, but raised in Sofia, Bulgaria. And if you've looked up the topic here, you've noticed that it's about Pomaks, which is a minority group within Bulgaria that identifies as Muslim and Turkish, or as ethnic Turks, and that's a question of identity. And so she'll help us to understand the origins and context of this group. If you are interested in this group, or this intrigues you at all, Professor Schürcks has proposed that we apply for some funding for cooperative work between the University of Kansas and her home universities in Germany to follow up with field work and linguistic and ethnographic analysis of this group. So if you're interested, please see Professor Schürcks afterwards, and in general, please be aware that she's here through the middle of November and available for a consultation. She'll be giving a couple of other talks on campus, and let's take advantage of the fact that she's here and has this expertise that we so rarely get exposure to. So very pleased to have you with us today, and looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, the Department of Slavic, Professor Dickey, and the whole department as well, and the School of Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. Thank you to all of you for spending your lunch break. This is very uncommon in Germany, and this is with me, and I really appreciate it. First, I would like to tell you the structure of my talk, overview. First, I will tell you a couple of words who the Pomaks are. Then I will make some general historical remarks about the Pomaks, and I will concentrate on 3 groups, the Pomaks in Bulgaria, in Turkey, and in Greece. There is also a Pomak population in Macedonia, but unfortunately there are not studies known to me about the Pomaks in Macedonia. There are some ethnographical studies, but there's field work done, but not published as a research. And there are some Pomaks in Albania and Kosovo. Basically, they're called Tarbesh and Gorani. Okay, so let me start. First, this is the south of the Balkans. The Pomaks live. So this is the Rhodope Mountains, Sofia. Some of them live in Lovic. In Macedonia, they're concentrated here in Kosovo, Albania. They're here. It happens to be white, but they're concentrated here in Greece. They're in Thrace and Turkey. They're basically concentrated in the areas of Istanbul, Izmir, and the border, the Greek-Turkish border. Who are the Pomaks? Their identification is highly controversial. They're called Muslim Bulgarians in Bulgaria, Mohammedans, Slavic-speaking Greeks in Greece, Slavicized Turkish brothers in Turkey, and Macedonian Muslims, Torbesh in the Republic of Macedonia, or Torbesh and Gorani in Albania and Kosovo. I have to say that Gorani is this term is a bit controversial, so I preferred not to put that on in my presentation. So, in other words, Pomaks are not an ethnic group with a distinct mass group consciousness. They have highly contested identity, which leads to very subjective historical, geographical, and anthropological documentation. Let me continue by citing Mary Neuberger. She's a scientist who works, she's a historian, ethnographer, and she says in one of her publications, 2000, no Balkan Muslim identity is more contested, more wrapped in multiple intertwining twisted webs or myth and history than the Slavic-speaking Muslim of Pomaks of the southern Balkan range. Okay, so standing at the crossroads of language, ethnicity, and religion, the identification of Pomaks as a minority is highly controversial, as I already said. Throughout the Balkans, the case of Pomaks has not only challenged the nationalist versions of the history and assimilation campaigns, but also the established understanding of the notions of nation, ethnicity, identity, group boundaries. Despite the intellectual curiosity and perplexity that it creates among us scholars, even the use of the traditional name Pomak triggers a sharp criticism and a derogatory look in the general public. That's why I also listed all these names. Okay, we continue with the notion of Pomakness. A couple of other scientists, apart from Neuberger, Aliaminov, and Boboc Kojokaru, have cited Pomakness as in-betweenness rather than an affiliation with the classic concept of nationality in Southeast Europe. There is also no consensus on the etymology of the term Pomak, as you can imagine. The Bulgarian sources say that it comes from pomagac, which is helper, and pomagac is meant helpers in the Ottoman army during the Ottoman during the period of the Ottoman Empire. Then Pomaka, which means by pain, Pomaka is by pain, people who suffer due to the change of their names or the constant, we will see later that there was a constant change of names or change of the religion. So they were forced to change their religion, and especially in Bulgaria, they were forced to change their names, minimum twice. Okay, and the Turkish sources also confirm this pomagac, which is helper, but a word originally belonging. They say that this is a word originally belonging to the Cuman Turks, and the Greeks the Greek sources say that Pomaks comes from the word pomach, which is a drinker, because of the big wine areas which were located in Thrace. So until now, there's no consensus about the etymology. There's also no agreement related to their origin, yeah? Which is also astounding. Historically, Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey, as well as Macedonia, have contested the identity. I'll come back to the map later. Historically, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, and Macedonia have contested the identity of the Pomaks, each country considering them as their own. Greek scholars, for example, regard the Pomaks as the descendants of ancient Thracian tribes who, to quote one of the scientists working in this area, Sapel, says that over the centuries they were Hellenized, Latinized, Slavicized, Christianized, and converted to Islam. The Bulgarian scholars emphasize on using the language as a powerful piece of evidence for determining Pomaks as Bulgarians, and they also say their physical features, also blue eyes, basically blue eyes, and pale skin, which prove that the Pomaks are of Slavic, Bulgarian origin. And Bulgarian scholars say that Pomaks are Muslims solely because they were forced to convert to Islam in the 17th century. The Turkish scholars, on the other hand, they set forth the religious affiliation of Pomaks, and they claim that Pomaks have never been converted to Islam by force. And Pomaks are descendants of various Turkic peoples who were on the Balkans and had converted to Islam before the Ottoman conquest in the region. So you see how controversial these theories are. Okay. So let me, I don't mind if you ask questions in the meantime, but is everything clear? Okay. Now I'll concentrate on the Pomaks in Bulgaria. Pomaks in Bulgaria are estimated around 300,000. They live in compact settlements in Smolyan, Blagoevgrad, Pazardzhik, and Kyrgyzstan, the Rhodo Mountains. Let me go back to the map and show you. So, this is Kyrgyzstan, Pazardzhik, here, Rhodo Mountains, some of them Slavic, and a couple of hundred in Veliko Trnovo, which I myself was surprised to hear that. Okay. Right. Then they're traditionally mountain agropastoralists, combining small-scale cattle breeding with agriculture. So they live in the mountains. After World War I, they started to grow tobacco, and their social status was deteriorated after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. The reasons are that they have always been isolated. I mean, I don't want to include nowadays because things have been changing. Okay, they were always isolated. And the Pomaks' ideal was to stay away from the social and political life. So this feature, staying away from the social and political life, is a common feature for all of them in all areas. Okay, as you may notice, this has also a historical reason. There was the Christianization campaign of the Pomaks in Bulgaria in 1912, 1913 by a movement, it was a nationalist movement, Rodina, founded by the ethnographer Peter Marinov. Back in 1944, the Pomaks were allowed to take back their Muslim names. So see, what I say, what's in a name? Since we really do not have a very distinct, I would say, racial feature to distinguish the Pomaks from Bulgarians, Turks, and Macedonians. I mean, name has become of great importance. So name has become identification with the nation. So a feature of the identity because of that. And by 1973, all Pomaks had to take Bulgarian names by decree. Let me also quote some scientists who work in this area. This was a terrible time not only for the Pomaks, but for all Turkish population in Bulgaria. Which the Turkish, I would say that the Turkish population or the ethnical Turks in Bulgaria are around 1 million, and with the Pomaks they were more now, and all of them were forced to change their names. So all these people were really suffering, and as a result, there was mass immigration to Turkey. But let me quote. In April 1962, the Politburo is, you know what a Politburo is, in Bulgaria proclaimed measures against the self-identifications of Gypsies, Tatars, and Bulgarians professing the Mohammedan religion. These measures involved the change of names from Turco-Arabic to Bulgarian. The Pomaks children were taught only in Bulgarian, avoiding the appointment of Turkish teachers in schools where Pomaks students predominated, not appointing clergymen to Pomak villages, and so on. Resistance to this assimilation process was brutally put down. As Alia Minov, 2007, pointed out, scores were killed and hundreds were arrested and sentenced to long years of hard labor. So what I wanted to quote was the official explanation. The official explanation of the communist government was the Bulgarian Mohammedan was given the opportunity to regain his or her original Bulgarian identity. The Mohammedan was expected to embrace that chance with gratitude and henceforth proceed in life as a member of the Bulgarian community. So in other words, these name-changing campaigns, their reversals, and the kinds of resistance they provoke are undoubtedly central to understanding the Bulgarian Muslim encounter. In the Balkan context, where there is no visible or racial, as I said, racial difference between Christian and Muslim, names are one of the primary indicators of ethno-religious affiliation. So I already pointed that out. Okay. Okay, so when we come to identity of Pomaks in Bulgaria, there are some researchers who have different opinion. Konstantinov, in two publications, and myself, claim that there's a two-level identity structure among Pomaks, namely a religious orientation level and an ethnic orientation level. So we're interested only in this part. The first Islamic level is Pomak, religious level is Pomak is a Muslim, and the second ethnic level, which is the family and the immediate surroundings, not pure Turk. Well, we prefer we prefer this. It's terrible to say not pure Turk, but not necessarily Bulgarian. So we were wondering how to put that. Not Turk, but not Bulgarian. That's very interesting, and we're still looking for more fortunate definition of that. Okay, there are also other opinions. Karagiannis, who is a Greek scholar, differentiates among 6 options of identity that Pomaks may exhibit. We're talking about Bulgarians, yes. These include 3 assimilation options: Christian Bulgarian, secular Bulgarian, secular Pomak, and as well as 3 dissimilation. So 3 assimilation and 3 dissimilation options: Bulgarian, Mohammedan, and Muslim Pomak as the dissimilation option. So once again, assimilation: Christian Bulgarian, secular Bulgarian, and secular Pomak, and dissimilation option: Bulgarian, Mohammedan, Muslim Pomak, and Turkish. a bit complicated, but I think this is a very also very precise classification. Ali Aminov also has his own version about identity. His point of departure is that the disjuncture between those who define ethnic identities according to essential principles and those whose definitions follow constructionist or instrumental principle. So there is a disjunction. The first, or those who define ethnic identities according to essential principles, insist on the objective nature of group identities, which are fixed and resistant to change. The constructivists, on the other hand, examine the specifics of ethnicity as an individual choice. Ethnic identities are not fixed but fluid, changing according to subjective evaluation by individuals and groups of circumstances at given time and place. I think I have not cited all opinions now, but I mean the prevailing opinions of scholars about the identity. I think all of them are right, and I wonder how we can find also a more appropriate definition, because as Ali says, this notion is not fixed but fluid and changing according to subjective evaluation. So maybe we will never find a fixed definition, and this definition will change according to circumstances. Okay, so I'm moving to the Pomaks in Greece. Let me show you. Sorry. Yes. Okay. The Pomaks in Greece. I have to use the second idea. Yes, here. The Pomaks in Greece are reside in this area near north of Thessaloniki. They're in East and West Thracia. There's a town called Xanthi. Even there is a Xanthi dialect of the Pomaks. The Pomaks in Greece are around 50,000, according to one of the last censuses in 2002. As I said, reside in East Macedonia and Thrace in northern Greece. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 excluded the Muslim minority of Western Thrace from the population exchange. And after the Greek-Turkish Friendship Agreement of 1930, the anti-Kemalist leadership was replaced by a Kemalist one. Then the Kemalist leadership established Turkish nationalism in Western Greece. Then in the early 50s, the entire Muslim minority of Greece was recognized as a Turkish minority. What the difference between the attitude of the Greek governments and the Bulgarian government is huge. What I mean is the Greeks have never undertaken assimilation measure. Okay, so they somehow I would say ignored the existence of the Pomaks, but there were never attempts to assimilate them. Okay, then again in Greece the word Muslim was replaced by the word Turkish in all official documents. In 1969, the Greek junta reintroduced the word Muslim to refer to the Pomak minority and began to deny its Turkish identity. You can also see behind the political reasons. Greece ignored consistently the Muslim in its economic and social policy. What I mean, the Muslims are also the ethnic Turks, not only the Pomaks, but the ethnic Turks who live in Greece. And the treatment of the Muslim minority as a uniform entity and or as a Turkish minority was strongly facilitated by Turkization of the Pomaks. And the overwhelming majority of the Greek Pomaks consider themselves to be Turks. You see that this was a direct consequence of the historical and political development in Greece. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. As I said, there were no efforts at cultural homogenization and structural integration which facilitated the assimilation of the Pomaks into the Turkish part of the Muslim minority. The Greek Pomaks attended minority schools which were tailored to the needs of the Turkish minority. Languages of instruction were Greek and Turkish, while in Bulgaria, the Bulgarian Pomaks attended always Bulgarian schools. So there's a difference in this point. And in Greece, the Pomaks have never had the opportunity to be taught in their own language. Okay, the assimilation, which is an assimilation, I would say, from inside, was augmented by Pomak-Turkish marriages. And it is also interesting that no Greek Pomaks regard themselves as Greeks. Okay. Are there any questions until now? Okay. So I'm moving to the Pomaks in Turkey. Let me pull out the map. They're concentrated in the area I'm using. This, in the area of Izmir, Karabakh, and correct me so, and Istanbul. Where is it? I cannot see clearly. Here, Karabakh and Istanbul. Here. And basically in the area which are bordering on Bulgaria. Kyrgyzly, you see here, Bulgaria. They're concentrated on the European part. Most of them are in the European part, so less are in the Asian part of Turkey. But I will tell you exactly where they are residing in a moment. So there are more than 300,000, and some sources quote 600,000. I'm afraid that maybe, I'm not very sure, but the sources which claim that there are 600,000 perhaps mean also the so-called Bulgarian Turks who immigrated. So it's not clear whether there really is 600,000. That we cannot we cannot put a dividing line between. So the Pomaks in Turkey are settled in former Greek villages after the population exchange in Lausanne, 1923. Differing from the Pomaks in Greece and Bulgaria, they prefer urban areas. There is a perception to have a more secure life in the open communities of cities. And the native population of Turkey calls the Muslim newcomers muhacir, or old immigrants, and Göçmen, recent immigrants. So actually there's no official minority called Pomaks. They're somehow scattered into the other minorities in Turkey. Today, the Pomaks live in the provinces of Balıkesir, what I tried to show you. I'm sorry, I didn't remember those names. Balıkesir, Bursa, Edirne, Izmir, Kırklareli, and Tekirdağ. There are some immigrant associations of Pomaks which have been found in the cities, but there are no attempts undertaken to preserve the Pomak language and culture. As you can guess, the religion plays a decisive role in the shaping of an identity. It increases the chances that Pomaks identify with the Turks, and at the same time encourages distance to their linguistically closest relatives, the Bulgarians. The distinction between the religious groups of Sunni and Alevi was preserved, although I know that according to not official sources, Sunni are much more than Alevi. In many villages, the language Pomakcha, which is the local dialect, is still spoken. It is well established in some families and only little or not in others. And there's a predisposition to Turkish. This predisposition to Turkish has led to various degrees of neglect of Pomakcha. The names of Pomak population, they are entirely Turkish, but they have preserved their Pomak nicknames alongside. Okay, I'm coming to the conclusions. Maybe I have taken more time. The dilemma related to the Pomak faith lies in their in-betweenness. I agree with that. and they were both assumed to be co-nationals at the same time and traitors. Yeah, and co-nationals because they were within one nation, and traitors because at other times they belonged to another nation. Pomaks, again, I quote Neuberger, Pomaks were perceived as a gray zone ripe to be painted white or black by the pretenders to their national wills. The nation states perceived Pomaks as either insiders or outsiders. And the multiple layered and shifting Pomak identity has been a result of extensive interaction and intensive negotiations between the minority and the majority. Pomaks have been confused and threatened by the constantly shifting borders, ethnicities, and policies. There's some sort of agreement between scholars that Pomakness is a private identity, Pomakness is their private identity, and Turks, Bulgarians, or Macedonians is their public identity. And a private Pomak identity enabled them to enjoy their local affiliation and sustain inclusion and sustain the inclusion and exclusion systems. On the other hand, the Turkish, Bulgarian, or Macedonian identity enabled them to negotiate their survival through the inconsistent minority policies. Coming toward nowadays, the supranational European identity offers the Pomaks a new way to assert their distinctive identity without any nationalist harassment. Their slow but continuous adaptation of the Pomaks to being European citizens. We can spot a new dynamic in the identity formation of Pomaks, which is changing, and this can be a very good research topic. The increase of resources available to minorities and projects for their socio-economic and cultural development is apparent. One of these projects is the EU motion, European Union motion, for protection of lesser used languages, including Pomak. So this motion, European Union has issued a couple of decrees. The earliest one was in 2002, decrees for protection of lesser used languages. And my opinion, joint efforts of the countries in the region, EU or non-EU, all the countries in the region, will help to overcome the historically inherited economic and ethnocultural marginalization of Pomaks. Thank you very much.